Jacobson. I like to use this gavel. Welcome to the Enforcement Program Oversight Committee of the California Board of Accountancy. My name is Nancy Corrigan. I'm the chair of the committee. This is Thursday, November 21st, and I'd like to start with a roll call, starting with you, Mr. Savoy, please.
Michael Savoy.
Dan Jacobson.
Nancy Corrigan.
Mark Silverman.
Katrina Salazar.
Very good. And with having a quorum, we will proceed to agenda item 1 for approval of the minutes of July 25th, 2019, the last time that the EPOC met.
So moved.
And I have a motion. I have a second. Is there any other discussion amongst the committee members? Is there any discussion from the public? Seeing that there is none, please call for the vote.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
and Mark Silverman.
Yes.
And so that has passed, and those have been accepted. Moving on to agenda item 2 is a discussion and possible action regarding revisions to the petition form. We have Ms. Shauna Palacios, Enforcement Analyst. Ms. Palacios, please.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Shauna Palacios and I'm an enforcement analyst. To begin, the purpose of the agenda item is to provide the CBA with information on revisions staff performed to the petition form. The revisions were made to assist petitioners with providing as complete a package as possible. Page 2 of the agenda item explains the revisions. I'd like to highlight a few of those revisions with you. Attachment 1 starts with the revised petition form cover letter. The first page of the letter informs the petitioner that there are 2 types of petitions: reduction of penalty and reinstatement of certificate or license. It also lists the various requests that may fall under the 2 types of petition. Lastly, it advised the petitioner that if they have multiple requests that fall under one or both types of petition, they should select all that apply. Following the cover letter is the petition form, labeled pages 1 through 8 on the bottom of each page. This form has been thoughtfully revised. I'd like to call your attention to the first page, which includes separate sections for petitioners to select the license type they are petitioning for, whether it be CPA or firm, and separate boxes have been added for the petitioner to select all the petition types they wish the CBA to consider. Also, on page 4, a new section labeled as question 9 has been added for petitioners to explain their petition details in narrative form. Behind the petition form are the standard attachments, which are the CBA meeting dates and the applicant live scan forms, which is 3 pages. Next, you'll see that the California Board of Accountancy Petition Hearings Manual has been added as an informative attachment to the petition form. The manual offers petitioners information on the overall petition hearing process, the role of the CBA, information on the burden of proof, and references of prior petition hearings. Finally, I've included attachment 2, which is Business and Professions Code Section 5115, which is referenced in the cover letter. The improved petition form provides the CBA with necessary information to begin assessing whether a petitioner is fit to practice public accounting and to better process the petitioner's request accurately. That concludes my remarks, and I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions for Ms. Palacio and the information that's being presented amongst the members? And as I understand it, there's no specific action required. However, committee members may have suggestions or comments regarding this information and what might make it more helpful.
Correct.
Anything along those lines, committee members? Okay, seeing that there are none, nothing from the public. All right, then I will move along to agenda item number 3.
I'm sorry, can I ask a very quick question?
Certainly.
Are petitioners required to use this form, or is it just something to help them?
It's something to assist them. We've seen it come in other ways, but those are usually less successful in terms of
Okay.
presenting the information.
Thank you, that's all.
So this is meant to be a complete information gathering process to move move it along as expeditiously as possible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3, discussion and possible action to amend the proposed regulatory text for Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 98, disciplinary guidance and model orders, and Section 99.1, rehabilitation criteria for denials, suspensions, revocations, restorations, reduction of penalty. Mr. Franzella?
Ms. Salazar had her hand up
Oh,
for the
I'm
last one, so
sorry. I apologize.
no.
You
Well,
must be in my blind side this morning.
This is just, and Ms. Palacios has already left. I noticed that there were reference webcasts for what a petition hearing is. I thought that was very nice. I was just curious if the petitioners that were in that particular webcast, if there was any notification required. I do know it's public record, but I thought it was.
Yeah, no, we update those on occasion to try to bring the most current kind of hearings that the board has had, but no, we've never considered notifying them.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Franzella, please.
Yes. Thank you. So this item is before the CBA to allow members to consider and possibly adopt revisions to previously approved regulatory text for CBA regulations, Section 98 and 99.1. So staff requested CBA approve the proposed revisions to that previously adopted text, which is specifically related to rehabilitation criteria. So back in March of this year, the CBA adopted comprehensive revisions to various regulations related to the disciplinary guideline, substantial relationship criteria, and rehabilitation criteria. And the CBA also adopted new text to establish criteria for directly and adversely financial crimes. Upon the CBA adoption of that text, staff completed the necessary rulemaking materials to initiate the rulemaking and submitted these materials to DCA to complete its review. Recently, DCA Legal Affairs Office contacted staff related to concerns it had with some construction of the proposed regulatory text associated with the rehabilitation criteria. These concerns did not have any impact related to the policy contemplated and the policy contemplated and adopted in those regulations. Staff worked with DCA to address these concerns and have developed proposed regulatory text for CBA consideration and possible adoption. The text can be found in the accompanying attachments. Quickly, attachment 1 and 2 ultimately have the same regulatory text but have been formatted differently. Attachment 1 is the text originally adopted by the CBA and submitted back to DCA earlier this year, with the proposed changes that are now being brought forth to the board in double strike through and double underline, so the board can compare what was originally strike through and underline and submitted, and now what's being proposed to be eliminated or moved. Attachment 2 is how the proposed modifications would look in single underline and strike through compared to the original CBA regulations. And this will be the text that staff would submit back to DCA to replace the iteration that they presently have. And attachment 3 is an excerpt from the disciplinary guidelines related to rehabilitation criteria with the changes noted in single underline and single strike through, similar to attachment 2. The addition of the disciplinary guidelines is necessary because that criteria is incorporated into the guidelines. There are other sections within the disciplinary guidelines that are not applicable to this request: mitigation, aggravation, rehabilitation evidence, the various minimums and maximums for the discipline. It's the one section where there's a regulation that's a standalone, but also has been incorporated at some point and put into disciplinary guidelines, so it needed to be addressed as well. On page 2 of your materials, I've outlined the specific changes, which I'll just quickly highlight because I know this material came out late, so I'll just kind of go over them in a bit more detail. Subsection A, and specifically subparagraphs 1 and 15, are being removed from the list of criteria. The subparagraphs in section A are being re-enumerated to address the removal. A revised subsection B and C have been created to address how the CBA will evaluate certain criteria as it pertains to individuals who are applying for initial licensure. And a new subsection D has been added to explain how the CBA will evaluate the completion of a criminal sentence when considering the revocation and petition for reinstatement of a license or petition for reduction of penalty. The basis for the changes initially stemmed from the original text in subsection A and subparagraphs 1 and 15 being incorporated as criteria. The CBA considered as rehabilitation. DCA indicated that these are not criteria and are not appropriate to have included in that criteria section. The proposed changes seek to address this issue raised by DCA by creating 3 new sections, the B, C, and D, and how that criteria is applied. Subsections B and C relate to applicants and the application of criteria, both if the criminal conviction was successfully completed without a violation of parole or probation, and instances where a violation occurred or criminal act was not the nature of the possible denial. And subsection D is focused on licensees and individuals who've had their license revoked or placed on probation. So staff are recommending, and the recommendation can be found on page 3. Staff recommend the following motion: approve the proposed modifications to the regulatory text for the CBA regulation section 99 and the accompanying disciplinary guidelines and model orders, and section 99.1, and direct staff to submit the proposed changes to the existing rulemaking file under review by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. This concludes my remarks, and I'll turn it back over to the chair and do my best to answer any questions members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Franzella. Are there any questions for Mr. Franzella from the members? Mr. Jacobson.
If I may have a clarification, I think you just said that we'd also be voting on section 99, but I only see that we have section 99.1.
It's only 99.1. If I said 99, I apologize.
And I apologize if I misheard.
So it's 98 and 99.1.
Yeah, and it's only
And 98 is not included because it doesn't
Yeah.
really have to be the way that this is constructed, as I
Correct.
understand.
correct. It's only because the disciplinary guidelines are incorporated by reference, and it's just the excerpts to that disciplinary guideline.
Okay, very good. Any other questions for Mr. Franzella? Yes.
I just, you answered the question in your presentation, Mr. Gonzalez, but I just want to orally confirm you and staff are comfortable with, this movement away from criminal convictions becoming a black mark on somebody's record for their career. You're comfortable with what DCA and staff have come up with in that regard?
So, yes, mainly because it's the policy outside of the board. This was all done through statute. The language that's being articulated in the regulation, honestly, is actually, it mirrors the statute in a lot of ways. It's one of the requirements that statute placed on the various boards and bureaus. But taking a step back, the board did support just the general nature of what 2138 was seeking to do, which is the criminal convictions and trying to create less barriers and impediment. We had some concerns and we had opposed the bill unless amended. And a lot of those were addressed over time. And so I think the board as a whole was supportive of the idea. And then now we're just incorporating some of those changes that were mandated by law. So as for the language itself, yes, I worked closely with around 4 attorneys at DCA's legal office to try to come up with something that worked for both the board and for DCA. This was agreed upon and presented to the board, and I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Franzella? Okay, may I have a motion then regarding these recommendations on page 3 of 4?
With that.
And do I have a second?
I second that.
Okay, is there any discussion amongst the committee members? Any comments or discussion from the public? Seeing that there are none, Ms. Reed, please call for the vote.
Mark Silverman,
Yes.
Michael Savoy,
Yes.
Katrina Salazar,
Yes.
Dan Jacobson,
Yes.
and Nancy Corrigan.
Yes. Thank you, and motion carried then. Very good. Thank you again, Mr. Franzella.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 4 would be our category for public comments. And seeing that there are none, moving on to agenda item 5, agenda items for the next EPOC meeting. Seeing there are none at this point, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.